YouTube frogs, welcome to my complete guide for Changli, the newest fiery hot fusion 5-star in Wuthering Waves. Changli operates mostly as an on-field main DPS, but can also rotate as a quick swap DPS, dealing large amounts of fusion damage by continuously stacking her Forte bar. In this video, I'll be teaching you how she works, how to play her, best weapons and echoes to use, stats to aim for, what her sequence nodes do, and the core teams she functions on. Also, don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed the video. I make a bunch of content for Wuthering Waves, both educational and just for fun. Let's begin. So, Changli is that character that really gets your blood flowing. From the infamously spicy cutscenes into the Wuthering Waves story, to her soft yet seductive tone of voice, Changli will always have complete control over you, and that's okay. So Changli's gameplay revolves around her Forte bar down there, which is called Inflamement. It starts off at 0 stacks, and if you execute specific moves, she'll gain 1 stack. Once she's at 4 stacks, executing her heavy attack will deal a large amount of damage. Now, there are multiple ways of receiving 1 stack, but almost all of them have a combo requirement to execute them. The easiest way is by activating her ult, which immediately grants her 4 stacks from 0. This is the only part of her kit that grants her a full bar from nothing, and is usually used as like a free reset mechanic to gain a full bar. We'll dive into more details in Playstyle section because her play is complex but flexible. The usual ways of receiving 1 stack is her core gameplay mechanic called True Sight. Her E is an immediate activation of True Sight, causing the next left click, jump, or mid-air basic attack to grant 1 stack. She initially starts off with 2 charges of her E, and this refreshes once every 12 seconds. If you don't have her E up, the second major way of entering True Sight is through her basic attack string. Completing her basic attack 4 will grant her True Sight, and the next left-clicked, jump, or mid-air basic attack after that will grant 1 stack. Basic attack 4 into True Sight can be triggered one of 3 ways. The first is just normal left-clicking, which requires basic 1 to 4 to complete. The second is perfect evasion into a dodge counter, which is the basic attack you do right after a successful perfect evasion, which grants you about a second of iframe. This instantly skips the first 2 basic attacks and starts from basic attack number 3. The third is normal swapping in without the intro skill. Changli will enter into the battlefield and begin with basic attack 2, skipping the first one. In all 3 of these cases, once True Sight is granted, the next attack will grant 1 stack. The final way to enter True Sight is through her intro skill. Swapping in with her intro skill active instantly will give her True Sight after the attack completes. So, basically, Changli's entire gameplay is all about those Forte bar stacks at the bottom where you need True Sight to activate them. Get them as fast as possible, however you can, heavy attack to consume all of them to deal huge fusion damage, and then repeat. So, a TLDR for all the ways to get into True Sight. We have basic attack 1 to 4, just your standard attack chain. Then we have a swapping in without her intro skill, which leads to basic attack 2 to 4. And then we have evasion plus dodge counter, which is basic attack 3 and 4. And then we have the intro skill, and then we have the E charges. By the way, if you did notice, every single stack of her Forte bar changes her appearance slightly, and at 4 stacks, she becomes blindfolded, which is insanely cool. If you ult while she's at 4 stacks, which is not very optimal, because her ult should always be used when she's at 0 stacks because it gives you 4 for free, but sometimes you just want to see the pretty stuff. Her ult animation is upgraded to burn off that blindfold and burn your soul alongside it. Anyways, yeah, that's Changli's gameplay in a nutshell. You'll be constantly playing this combo game of getting True Sight into stack generation and weaving your E's to get free stacks. Now, for her damage output, it's almost all in her heavy attacks with full stacks combined with her ultimate. Her ultimate is her largest single-digit nuke under a 20-second cooldown. Her heavy attack is about half the strength of her ult at the same investment level, but it doesn't have a cooldown, it just needs 4 stacks of the Forte bar as a requirement. Even though it is a heavy attack activation, the damage is considered resident skill damage. So this is similar to Jin Shi, who has resident skill damage as her most important scaling besides ult damage. Alright, so Forte leveling priority. Number 1 is going to be Forte Circuit, Flaming Sacrifice. This is the middle node. This is for the 4 stack heavy attack nuke. Second is going to be her ult. Third is going to be her skill. Fourth and fifth are going to be her basic and intro abilities. Max out all of the extra nodes when you can for a free attack percent and crit rate. The middle nodes give Changli raw damage. The first node provides 5% fusion damage per stack of enflammement, maxing out at 20%, and the second node gives a free boost of 20% fusion damage and 15% ignore defense for only her heavy attack and her ult. Playstyle. So this section aims to provide you with some advanced tips to spice up your gameplay. I'm unfortunately not the most sweaty player, so bear with me if my gameplay is optimized or clunky. So the first thing is an extra benefit her ult provides. When she uses it, she gains a very specific buff only for the next heavy attack she casts. If you use her heavy attack within the next 10 seconds, she'll gain a 25% attack bonus for that heavy attack only, and then the buff will disappear. This means that post-ult, it is almost always optimal to instantly heavy attack again, because usually this is at the end of her rotation, which means she's receiving all the buffs that are about to expire from her Echo and Forte nodes for that specific ability. The second thing is swap canceling. As is common with long animation abilities, Changli has some swap cancels that you can utilize if you want to min-max DPS. Besides her Inferno Rider Echo, her E charges can also be swap cancelled, but still retain their True Sight activation for 12 seconds. So being able to swap cancel right when she receives the True Sight is a pretty big benefit that allows for a duo DPS to switch in for maximum DPS. True Sight lasts for 12 seconds and remains on Changli even when she's off field. So, once you swap her back in, she'll immediately be able to proc a True Sight attack, granting her a stack. Executing these quick switches is not necessary, as she'll do perfectly fine fully on build with her normal combo rotation, but if you'd like to min-max the extra DPS and want a little extra challenge, it's all there for you to try out. In general, a basic rotation follows something like this. You'll intro skill, then proc True Sight, basic 4, and then proc True Sight again, and then you'll use both E's for 2 True Sight procs, and then you'll have 4 stacks, heavy attack, ult, and then heavy attack. So intro skill allows you to instantly proc True Sight for 1 stack, and then into a complete basic attack chain for the second, and then you'll use 2 charges of her E for the third and 4th. Echo skill is ideally used before both E procs for maximum DPS, and also so that the buff can remain long enough to complete the heavy attack, ult, and heavy attack combo. This is the ideal combo if you're using a signature weapon for Changli, as her weapon will build up resonant skill damage stacks, granting the greatest strength to the end of her combo, which consists of 2 heavy attacks, which are considered resonant skill damage, and 1 ult. If you decide to use her ult at the beginning, you force Changli to use her heavy attack right away, which doesn't give enough time for her weapon to stack up. Obviously, you can play Changli however you want. I just want to provide you guys with optimal setup for highest DPS windows. If you do incorporate swap cancels, remember that her Echo and E charges are the most important abilities to cancel. Intro skill may not be needed because her intro sends her airborne, making your allies quick swap a little awkward because if they aren't used to being airborne, you're forced to plunge attack. Besides that, every single time you would have done a full basic attack chain, this means basic attack 1 to 4, you can try to dodge counter instead. So basically, wait for the enemy to try to hit you and then dash so that you trigger a perfect evasion, because the attack afterwards will be a dodge counter that allows you to skip the first 2 basic attacks, and you'll have iframes while doing so, which means you only need 2 basic attacks, which are 3 and 4, to get True Sight. If you have her intro skill, you generally only need to do this dodge counter once, because intro skill and 2 E charges will already give you 3 stacks, so you only need 1 extra stacks. But if you are playing heavy quick swap Changli, you might end up needing to dodge counter twice because you're not going to guarantee an intro skill for her. So all of these extra advanced tips, in my opinion, really make Changli a high skill ceiling character to master. After playing her for a while, I also noticed a couple crucial things. No matter what attack sequence you choose, she almost always has a decent delay to her attacks. While these attacks are quick swappable, against difficult bosses with fast sequence attacks, namely like the Hazard Tower or the Holograms, it leaves either your Changli or the swapped in character immediately vulnerable and susceptible to instant attacks from the enemies that aren't easily dodged. For this reason, I noticed that Changli is a character you really need to pay attention to attack patterns, and abusing evasion and dodge counters for free iframes and also to activate True Sight quicker is essential to her combo upkeep. Her heavy attack also has a decent animation time, and if you plan to combo it with her ult into another heavy attack, make absolutely sure the enemy isn't in the middle of an attack sequence or starting one up. That will hit you immediately once you lose your ult iframe. Overall, she's an anti-button mashing character, requiring patience for the right DPS windows for her kit to shine. All of these extra advanced tips, in my opinion, really make Changli a high skill ceiling character to master. Weapons. So Changli is a stereotypical on-field DPS, which means she'll be prioritizing the standard stats of crit, attack, energy, and damage bonus. If you have the option, Changli's main source of damage comes from Resonance Skill and Resonance Liberation, so any damage bonus sources for those two is also optimal. As a sword user, and because we're still in the early patch cycles of the game, we're pretty limited on unique weapon selection. Thankfully, the sword roster has more DPS-oriented options than other categories, and, most importantly, has a standard 5-star weapon called Emerald of Genesis that has a crit secondary. In Wuthering Waves, weapon banners are guaranteed to give you the weapon on rate up, and for standard banner, you are able to select the 5-star first before committing any summons. So if you do plan on playing Changli, but don't want to pull for her signature weapon, having the 5-star standard weapon is the second best option. Let's first break down her signature weapon, Blazing Brilliance. So crit damage secondary up to 48.6% at level 90, 12% attack, and a buff granting 4% resonance skill damage that stacks up to 14 times for a total of 56%. At max stacks, the 56% buff will remain for 10 seconds, after which it will completely reset. This weapon has insane synergy for Changli, providing the trifecta of stat bonuses for her: attack, crit damage, and resonance skill damage bonus. Using this weapon will provide a healthy amount of crit damage and will most likely incentivize you to stack crit rate on her echo stats. In comparison, the standard 5-star Emerald Genesis provides up to 24.3% crit rate, 12% energy regen, and 6% attack, stacking up to 2 times. Emerald's crit rate bonus matches Blazing's crit damage bonus at a 1-to-2 ratio, but the rest of the bonuses from the passive are much lower than what her signature provides. It's still a very good weapon for Changli, just weaker than her signature. Other possible weapons. As of current, there are no other 4-star or lower swords that provide crit rate secondary, so any of these weapons will be strict attack percent stat sticks at best. The Battle Pass sword provides attack percent, but doesn't really have a synergistic passive, as it provides basic attack and heavy attack damage bonus on skill cast, but those bonuses are relatively tertiary for Changli. Weapons like Commando of Conviction and Lunar Cutter are the most ideal 4-stars, providing meaningful passive attack percent buffs that benefit Changli. The other 4-stars are basically inferior to the previous that I just mentioned, so I wouldn't recommend them. If you lack all of those options, then you can still use the 3-star Sword of Night. It's a temporary stat stick that you can use until you get your hands on a better sword. Overall, I think that over 90% of you guys will use either her signature or Emerald of Genesis for their crit rate or crit damage secondaries, and the 10% of you guys who don't have the resources for either one will settle for Commando of Conviction or Lunar Cutter. Echoes. So just like with weapons, we are pretty limited on the echo set options for any character. Changli is a fusion main DPS, so she's really got only one major set, 5-piece Molten Rift. This is the dedicated fusion set and it has perfect synergy on its 5-piece. Raw fusion damage plus 30% after using her resonance skill for 15 seconds, which is basically 100% practical uptime for Changli, given that her skill has a cooldown of 12 seconds, and you'll be activating it at least once before her largest sources of damage. Combined with the 2-piece, the total set grants her 40% fusion damage bonus on 100% uptime, which is absolutely huge. Now, the other 5-piece option you could consider is 5-piece attack set or Lingering Tunes. This set essentially gives 30% attack for an on-field DPS, starting at 10% and scaling up. It also has outro skill damage boost, but Changli's outro skill is not a damaging ability, so this is basically wasted. If Changli's outro skill were to be a damage ability, the 5-piece attack set would be a decent alternative to 5-piece fusion in the case where you don't have a finished fusion set yet. If you don't have either set, you could also consider a 2-piece attack and 2-piece fusion plus 1 rainbow piece, which gives you a little bit of flexibility with 1 off piece at the cost of 10 to 20% raw stat from missing the 5-piece set bonus. Main stats. So as of patch 1.1, we only have one possible 4-cost fusion piece, which is from the Inferno Rider, meaning endgame Changli builds can only run 4-3-3 build. Other previous units like Jin Shi and Yin Lin had the option of running a double 4-cost instead because they had access to 2 different boss echoes for the 4-cost. This means that Changli's build path is basically as standard gets for DPS. There's only one active echo to use, which is Infernal Rider, and it is swap cancelable. It also does have a riding mode for overworld traversal if you hold down the echo skill. Kind of fun. For the 4-cost stat, the default choice for Changli is to run crit rate. This applies for signature weapon users and attack percent weapon users. She doesn't have any crit rate nodes from her Forte, so her base crit rate is basically the lowest possible. Running a crit damage 4-cost is possible for the following conditions. If you have E2 Changli, which provides 25% crit rate for free basically, and or you have the standard 5-star weapon Emerald of Genesis. Both of these provide around 25% crit rate each, which is sufficient enough to replace the crit rate 4-cost and trade it for crit damage. For the remaining slots, we have 3-3-1-1. So you'll have the standard fusion or attack for both the 3-costs, and then of course attack percent for the 1-costs. Both the 3-cost echoes can be interchanged with attack percent. This is completely flexible and really depends on your weapon choice, your team supports, and the substats that you have on those pieces. Changli has pretty high base fusion damage from her Echo Set 5 piece, from her Forte middle nodes granting 20 to 40% fusion damage, but full team setups can also provide a lot of attack percent, so the stat distribution ends up being pretty balanced. Those of you running signature weapon will also have an immense amount of extra damage percent from the passive that running a single 3-cost attack percent may output overall more DPS. But personally for me, having double elemental damage bonus just looks far cleaner, so even if it might be a DPS loss and it'd be better to run attack percent, I'm still going to run elemental damage bonus. For substat priority, we have obviously crit rate and crit damage first, absolutely important, and then we have attack or resonant skill damage bonus. I would qualify these as roughly the same, then energy regen as necessary. Recommended stats. So my Changli is level 80 out of 80 with a level 80 weapon, but we're at the stage where getting level 90 is possible with UL 60. I'm currently almost there. But for the purposes of this stat section, the change is pretty minimal because all of her Forte nodes can be activated at level 80, so we're just missing a little bit of attack and crit damage from leveling up her weapon. Expect these stat ranges using my 433 build level 80 Changli as a reference. So attack is going to be about 2 to 2.4k, depends on your stats. Aim for at least 70 plus crit rate. If you're S2, you'll get a free 25%, so make sure to cap your build at 75% or you're going to overcap. Crit damage, anything higher than 225%. Now, you'll see mine is 275. Anywhere between 250 to even 300% is possible. My build with 275 has crit damage rolls on every single echo. If you had near max rolls, you can squeeze between 280 to 290%. Now for the energy regen, anything above 100% is nice. Around 120% is recommended for ultimate uptime. Now these attack ranges are for double 3-cost fusion damage main stat. You'll see here that my fusion damage bonus is at 70%. If you're using attack 3-cost, then this fusion damage will drop by 30% and expect your attack to rise to about 2.5k or higher. Resonance chain or sequence nodes. Alright, so Changli's sequence nodes are pretty straightforward, providing quality of life and massive sources of damage increase. S1. Activating her skill or her heavy attack grants her 10% damage bonus each for up to 20% and also grants her resistance interruption. The resistance interruption is the most important part of this, allowing her to complete her basic attack string without being interrupted and entering true sight. While you don't need this, it does improve the quality of life quite significantly. It's not a true one-to-one analogy, but you can kind of think of this like Hu Tao C0 to C1. S2. Changli gets basically free 25% crit rate. Inflamement is whenever she gets a charge of her Forte bar, which is essentially all the time. Once you're at 4 stacks, you can't get any more, but you'll almost always do her heavy attack combo and reset the 4 stacks when you're there. S3, 80% damage bonus to her ult, pretty standard stuff. S4, intro skill grants 20% attack to teammates for 30 seconds. This seems to be a pretty common trend among S4s. S5, both a 50% multiplier increase to her heavy attack and also 50% damage bonus increase. This is another reminder that her heavy attack, Flaming Sacrifice, deals damage that counts as resonant skill damage bonus. It's kind of weird. And then S6, so all major parts of her kit, this includes her resonant skill, heavy attack, and ult, receive 40% ignore defense. So basically, just deal a lot more damage. So overall, Changli's sequence nodes are pretty cookie cutter for a DPS character. There's no major gameplay upgrade that she receives, she just gets free buffs, has an easier time completing her combos, and deals a lot more damage. Team comps. So Changli is an interesting one. When I was playing with her, I actually enjoyed most when I could focus on just her and do her combos with dodge counters. But this would only require 1 or 2 supports and didn't really abuse a sub DPS. So this section is pretty much up for grabs, and it's fairly short because her playstyle was explained in an earlier section and is a lot more important. So I'm going to give you guys some unit recommendations that would work well with her. So combining her with the fusion DPS like Encore or Chixia is pretty damn good, because Changli's outro skill is fusion / ult damage bonus. Both of those characters are DPS characters, so you can run this as a duo DPS or swap DPS type playstyle. If you instead want to buff her personal DPS, you can run a dedicated support slot instead, like Tao Chi, who grants resonant skill damage bonus on outro skill. Of course, this would require you to get full concerto energy on Tao Chi, because that's the only way you're going to activate her outro skill. Or you can pair Changli with her disciple Jin Shi, who are both characters able to attack mid-air. This is a specific combo that allows a swap-heavy playstyle between these two that other characters can't exactly achieve. While this duo is strong for Changli, it's only okay for Jin Shi because Changli does not have coordinated attacks, meaning Jin Shi's Forte bar generation will be slower with this team. And the final slot for any team currently is Verena. No surprise here, super low on-field time, but massive amount of buffs and super easy concerto energy generation for outro intro skills. And of course, if you don't have Verena, which, most people should by now, you can still use Baizhi. And that wraps everything up. Overall, Changli's damage output is going to require proper play, and even when doing so, it is going to be difficult to exceed Jin Shi's damage output because Jin Shi is just that strong. Personally, I love Changli's gameplay design, and I think it has some of the most satisfying sound effects, especially after her true side attacks, that a character has to offer. And of course, you can never get too much of that beautiful summon animation, oh my goodness. If I missed anything about her or new things are discovered, let me know down below and I'll compile them in the pinned comment. As always, thank you guys for watching, good luck pulling Changli, and we'll see you next time. Take care.